taproom out here in November of 2018, and then I moved out here actually a couple months before the pandemic started, January of 2020.
That's always lovely.
Yeah.
That's we've heard so many stories about these breweries that open, they're catching wind, and then it's just nothing.
Yeah.
So quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we were fortunate. I mean, I feel honestly really bad for a lot of like smaller, mom and pop breweries. It really just. It's been hard for everybody, but I think especially for them. So we were at least fortunate that like, hey, we're a larger company. We're able to, like shift some stuff to off-premise and kind of make it work for us during that time. So, but yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah. So a big shock for us personally, from New England, we know the Sam Adams brand, right? You know the Boston Beer Company brand, but not a lot of people know that there's some roots in Cincinnati. So walk us through, how this brand started and what, kind of the role that Cincinnati played in it was.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would say up front, we certainly are a Boston-centric company. I mean, all of our, corporate offices, the majority of our team is based out of there. But it's really kind of fun and interesting. Our founder and brewer, Jim Cook, is actually from Cincinnati originally. He grew up here. And kind of a fun fact, the production brewery that we now own across the street from the taproom here, that's, kind of our reason for being here. But his dad actually worked at that brewery, and Jim ended up purchasing it. At that time, it was the Schonling Brewery back in the 90s, and he ended up purchasing it back in late 96, and by 1997, we were brewing, Boston Lager out of there. So we're about to hit on kind of a really cool milestone, which is 25 years we've been brewing in Cincinnati, which is pretty cool.
Actually, it's really cool, yeah.
Like during that time, I mean, and it's kind of the story of like breweries across the U.S. Honestly, like so many markets, including Cincinnati, it kind of consolidated where like big beer at that point, owned everything. All the small guys basically have been dissolved completely, and part of the ambition for purchasing this brewery was Jim wanted a way to be able to like control the process of brewing Boston Lager, and they had the equipment here, to do decoction brewing, which is like a big part of Boston Lager, and so he was familiar with the brewery obviously, so that's why he bought it. And fast forward to 25 years later, and at that point we were a pretty small team over there, but we're up to over 200 employees over there, and have grown a lot in the past year, which is pretty cool.
When you have visitors walk in here, do they know about the Cincinnati Roots really? Because obviously it's a very Boston-centric brand still.
It's interesting. It depends on who you talk to.
Right.
Like there are a lot of old-time Cincinnati folks that are pretty familiar with like the Utopias Schonling story and know that they own the brewery across the street at some point. But I would say, especially for younger drinkers, they're not really familiar with that. A lot of people from out of town don't really know that. I mean, that's like the biggest question we get is like, why are you guys here? Like,
right. It's like, oh, look at that. Like, they just they figured Cincinnati would be like a good place to expand, right?
Yeah, honestly, the biggest like impetus for us building the taproom here, besides Jim's history here, was like, we have one of the biggest contingencies of like coworkers here, and honestly, a lot of it came from them, like people basically saying like, we want a place to be able to go have a beer after a shift, like, and that was a big driver of it. Was like when they started looking at like, does it make sense to actually open something in Cincinnati? It was like, yeah, it did for us, because we have so many coworkers that want to have that experience and really like be proud of what they're doing locally.
Now everyone knows Boston Beer and Sam Adams, the cousin from Boston. The Boston Lager,
it's like haunting from the commercials.
I'm surprised the cutout was right when we walked in. Like, he doesn't leave Providence. He doesn't leave Boston.
It feels like home, though. I felt very comforted. I'm like, oh, it's still the New England stuff here.
Yeah. Exactly. But how many people would you say per year come locally as well as on the tourism side?
That's a really good question. I will say I don't have a good answer for that. The reason why I will say that is that we really only have like a full year of business under our belt before the pandemic hit, and like it's really hard that first year to like track appropriately, because obviously there's going to be a lot more growth that first year than like 5 years down the road of being open. And then with the pandemic happening, like it really has changed drinker habits like completely. Like driven business a lot more daytime. a lot more off-premise just in a lot of ways. And so I don't know, I guess is the short answer. But I will say we definitely are starting to see like beer tourism return to the city, which is awesome. Like if you look at probably like the top like 5 tourism reasons for people to come to Cincinnati, I think probably our brewing history and our breweries it's in the top 5, and so we do see a lot of people, especially from like markets within 6 hours or so here, coming to Cincinnati specifically to check out breweries. The part of the neighborhood we're in, we're now one of like 4 tap rooms in the neighborhood, which is pretty cool. So it's you can make a day of it. You can come here and make a day of it, which is cool. So,
and going on top of that, I mean, how would you describe the Cincinnati craft beer community? Because it was something that we newly discovered, and doing our research before coming for Bachfest, we're like,
Sure.
holy shit, like this is the real deal.
Right.
It's pretty unique. I will say, one, it's really rooted in history. I mean, were a lot of German immigrants that moved to Cincinnati originally, and so there's actually like a really rich German brewing history here in Cincinnati, and a lot of breweries, I mean, us included, I will say, kind of lean into some of that. Like, I think there's a preference for certain German styles here you won't find in other markets necessarily. I will say that as far as beer style goes, it's incredibly diverse too. Coming from the West Coast, like, no exaggeration, the top 20 selling SKUs at the grocery store are IPAs, like across the board. No other styles in the top 20. Here, it's actually really different. I mean, you will see like regional players here have like, not just IPA out in the market or at the tap room, but like a wheat ale, a German Pilsner, a Bach beer. We have a whole festival built around Bach beers.
I was gonna say, you talk about German beers. I'm like, well, you got Bach right in front of us for the next few days.
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's anywhere else in the U.S. that has like a Bach festival on this scale.
From our research, I did not see anything dedicated to Bach. No, I don't think
we don't
so.
get much Bach in Rhode Island.
No.
It's like,
There's a few that do it, and they do it well, but I don't think, it certainly seems like nothing competes with, such a rich German, like, traditional brewing style than Cincinnati does.
Yeah, there's Bachfest, and there's also, Cincinnati, which is like, last year was the biggest Oktoberfest in the world because the German Oktoberfest happened.
Yeah.
But
that's a nice little feather in the cap. Like, we once had the biggest Oktoberfest in the world.
It is. I mean, normally under normal conditions, it's in the top like 3 biggest in the world, which is crazy. But I mean, if you look at in our metro area, there's probably, I think we're up to like 60 breweries, like in Greater Cincinnati. And it's a pretty big footprint. We cover the tri-state area, but I would say probably 45 of those breweries have an Oktoberfest beer on or Marzen on during, that season. So I don't think you see that necessarily in other markets. I mean, maybe in New England a little bit, but we definitely really lean into seasonality here. We definitely lean into some of those historic styles. But, on the flip side, like, drinkers here love the hazy IPA as well. So it's...
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? It's literally called Wicked Hazy.
Yeah.
You've got a Wicked Hazy beer. Off that, too, we should probably highlight what we're drinking now.
Yeah.
And you can kind of walk us through.
Sure.
But I've got is it the Logan Street Wheat,
Logan Street
too?
Wheat, yeah.
Tastes pretty light. It's comfortable. I'm not, as we're doing this, it's 1 o'clock. I'm not ready to dive straight in. So what's going on with Logan Street Wheat here?
So it's kind of funny why we rebrewed that. We've brewed it previously, and you guys may have noticed when you came in right now, but there's a bunch of construction happening out on Logan Street in front of us, and it was kind of an inside joke for us. We were like, you know what? With all the construction going on, we should rebrew Logan Street Wheat.
Here we are. We're just drinking it now.
So that's why we rebrewed it here. But the idea behind that beer is supposed to be like a light, refreshing wheat beer. This still like has pretty good hop presence. So there's some Brew 1 hops in there. There's some Laurel hops in there. It definitely is meant just to be like a hoppy wheat, but not like it's not supposed to mimic IPA. It definitely has a lighter touch to it. Definitely more subtle, and honestly, just like a nice warmer weather refresher. I'd say.
Yeah, perfect to get in the mood for 78 tomorrow.
Yeah,
man.
We couldn't have wished for better Bachfest weather. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's incredible. What's on tap for you?
I think I grabbed the Avino Colombiana.
Yeah, the Avena Colombiana.
Yeah.
Nice.
So That beer is actually a really fun collaboration beer that we did, actually. You guys may or may not know, but we have a kind of program that Sam Adams runs called Brewing the American Dream. It gives basically grants to small businesses throughout the U.S. A few years ago in Cincinnati, one of the recipients of a grant was actually this place called the Arepa Place. And arepas are basically a kind of Colombian street food. Honestly, the easiest way I could describe it, if you've had a gyro or a hero or however you want to pronounce it before, it almost is like the Colombian version of that. It's kind of like a shell, like a corn pita type shell, that normally is stuffed with like seasoned meat. I definitely would recommend them to go try them if, during the time you're here. They're right over by Findlay Market. But the owner of that got a grant through Brewing the American Dream. She actually opened, right before the pandemic hit, similar to us, a storefront over there. And then we actually approached her about doing some kind of collaboration last year. And our head brewer, Chris, honestly, he was looking up like some kind of traditional drinks from Colombia and was really inspired by kind of the wide range of the kind of different styles and different things they're doing there. So we went over there, did a tasting with her, and kind of ran through like, hey, here's some traditional Colombian drinks, and we settled upon this. There's this traditional drink from Colombia called avena, which is it's essentially like a oated milkshake is the easiest way I could describe it. So this was our beer version of this. Definitely was really, really unique. We hadn't really seen anything like that done before, so that's why we wanted to try it out. We hear the feedback from drinkers a lot that it tastes like Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
I was gonna say, I taste the sweetness, yeah.
It's meant to be like, if you're in Colombia, it's meant to be like a breakfast drink type thing.
I love
it. The kind of milk alternative, I guess I would say.
My mind goes to like coquito for Puerto Rico too, like with the kind of spiced rum drinks almost, like almost milkshakey texture. Yeah. Long story short, I will be sampling that after this.
It definitely has that vibe to it for sure.
Yeah.
We have been super excited to work with her. She's been a great partner. Isis is the owner over there. She just opened her second store this past weekend in one of the suburbs around Cincinnati here. So we're excited to see that like things have been going great for her business wise, and this is one of those beers like it did really well when we had it on tap, and there's demand, and that's why we brought it back. So it's here exclusively in the tap room and also at her two stores. So it's one of the few beers that like is tap room only that we have sent out, but really just because it ties in the collaboration that we're doing. So
nice. And then so I want to cover the rest of the beers on the menu, and I know we kind of talked about some exclusive ones in the tap room, but there's one that I do want to touch upon that's not on the board. You probably know what I'm going to mention.
I think so. Maybe Utopias?
Yeah.
So obviously
we did our homework.
You had one of the releases. I thought it was funny. Illegal in 15 states. 28%. It was in a special copper brew kettle decanter. Retailing at $240. And sold out quick.
It did, yeah. So we're fortunate. We're one of the states where you actually can serve it. This will actually be a great plug. We are launching a Utopias tour this weekend, on Sunday, for the first time, which is pretty cool. We will do a tour of the tap room. We actually will take folks over to our barrel aging facility across the street and show off some kind of basically the tap room stuff that we're barrel aging right now, and then we end with you tasting the Utopias, which is pretty cool. We're pulling into the stash to grab some 2019 Utopias, which is awesome. But that beer, as far as Sam Adams goes, we brew that beer every 2 years. I think this past one was maybe the 10th time that we've done it. I'll have to double check that, but we've been brewing it for. I think this was 10 times every 2 years, like 20-ish years or so. And kind of one really, really cool aspect of Utopias is that every year that we brew it, it incorporates some of the blend from previous years. So when you have the 2021 version of it, it has some blend from each of the other previous 2 years. So dating back to when we first did it, which is kind of cool. We also do something kind of cool with the Utopias barrels here at the tap room afterwards. luckily, our head brewer Chris is able to get his hands on those, and we do typically a beer that's aged in Utopias barrels that we release at our anniversary party each year. So this past year was chocolate Boctopias.
Oh, wow.
And then the year before that was Stoutopias. So it was like a imperial stout aged in Utopias barrels. So
That's wild.
they're really cool barrels, though. I mean, they have tons and tons of character to them. You know, you get some notes in that beer that like you don't really get from other beers. It's like leather, sherry, you know, almost like brandy, cognac type of thing, which is pretty cool.
So with Utopias too, what are folks mostly coming here to go grab them? You know, how do they get their hands on them because they're so exclusive, right?
It is super, super rare.
Right.
I don't know off the top of my head the amount of barrelage we produce a year at Utopias, but it's like it's less than 500 barrels for the
Right.
year. I think it's like 300 or something like that.
So that probably goes really quick.
It does. So honestly, when it goes out to the market, it does go out to, you know, all 50 states, but in a very, very limited capacity. So a lot of times, you know, it goes to retailers that we have worked with, you know, for 20 plus years. You know, it does go in some limited capacity to some Kroger's around here. But honestly, it's a bit of a goose hunt. Like people, you know, gotta try to find it out in the market. They can come here to actually have a taste of it during our anniversary party. We do sell like individual tasters of it, which is kind of cool. So if you don't want to drop $240 on the bottle, that's one way you can try it out for sure. But honestly, a lot of it's luck to be able to find a bottle. Like even, you know, in New England and Boston, like it's probably one bottle per account that's going to.
Oh, man.
So if you get it, you're super fortunate, you know, and hang on to it for sure.
But that's interesting. So it's almost, you guys are distributing it too, because you mentioned one bottle per count. So that's leaving, you know, the tap room, the brewery, all that stuff, and you guys are actually shipping it, you know, all across, you know, your normal channels.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely the most limited beer that we do on that wide scale. And honestly, I think that was part of the intention behind it, was like we wanted something to be really, really exclusive, like a real gift, essentially. I mean, yeah, it's a big